On a day when the head of Parliament's Intelligence and Security Committee has questioned the whole mission in Afghanistan. The MP Kim Howells said it might be time to fight terror in other ways. Our World Affairs editor John Simpson reports from Kabul.
The injured were ferried to the British Army hospital at Camp Bastion. The 5 deaths mean that this year has been the worst for British military casualties since the Falklands War. There have been 92 so far. The policeman opened fire on the group from the roof of a checkpoint near the post where the British were based. They fired back, but he got away. He'd been in the police for 3 years, so if he was a Taliban infiltrator, he'd waited a long time to strike.
Our initial understanding of what went on is that an individual Afghan national policeman, possibly acting in conjunction with one other, started firing inside the checkpoint before fleeing from the scene.
The police in Afghanistan aren't always as well trained as the army, and they're not very well paid either. They earn less than the Taliban pay their volunteers. But as this group told us, they are well vetted. We undergo a lot of checks before we join the police, says this policeman. The British believe that the great majority of Afghan policemen and soldiers are entirely trustworthy. After all, they've suffered much more at the hands of the Taliban than the British or the Americans or other NATO countries have. But all the same, this kind of thing is deeply unsettling. British soldiers will be much more careful of Afghan police and soldiers from now on, and they're likely to have their guns ready to hand. It could scarcely have been worse for Gordon Brown, who knows that public support in Britain for the mission in Afghanistan is fading.
The death of 5 brave soldiers in a single incident is a terrible and tragic loss, and I want to pay tribute, as the whole House will, to their professionalism and to their courage and service.
The debate is really heating up now.
Either this regime gets serious about reforming itself and about playing its part in taking on violent jihadists and extremists, or else it seems to me we've got to consider pulling our troops out and fighting the threat of terrorism in a different way.
Gordon Brown's exit strategy is to train up the Afghan police and army to take control of Afghanistan's security themselves. But if the Afghan police can't entirely be trusted, it's going to make the strategy a lot harder. John Simpson, BBC News, Kabul.
One of those killed was Sergeant Matthew Telford of the Grenadier Guards. He joined the army aged 16 and leaves behind a widow and 2 young children. His uncle William told the BBC that Sergeant Telford had been an inspiration to the family.
Grimsby, an East Coast town built on the proceeds of the fishing industry and proud of its heritage. But this community is becoming increasingly aware of a terrible coincidence here. 2 of the 5 soldiers shot dead in Afghanistan yesterday came from the area. Sergeant Matt Telford of the Grenadier Guards was one of them. He'd been in the army since he was 16. He leaves 2 young sons and has been described by his family as a wonderful lad.
He absolutely loved his job, and I can't explain how much he meant to us all. He's going to be very, very sadly missed.
In fact, Sergeant Telford was so passionate about the army that before he went to Afghanistan, he worked here at the local careers office in Grimsby, where he promoted life in an organisation which he told recruits in his own words was where they would meet like-minded people who would become as close as family. The other soldier from this area has yet to be formally named by the Ministry of Defence. But this double loss in a community of just over 100,000 people has been received with great sadness.
Well, I think it's frightful. I'm very sad about it for the families. That seems to be how it is these days.
Yeah, poor people, poor families. But it's one of those things, isn't there? They join up for a reason, but it's still not nice when it happens, I suppose, is it?
The annual remembrance service will take place at the town's war memorial on Sunday, and organisers have already confirmed that special prayers will be said for the latest local casualties of war here. Danny Savage, BBC News, Grimsby.
Well, we're going to try and analyse exactly what's going on in Afghanistan now with the defence analyst Tim Ripley, who's in our central London studio.
Good evening.
Evening to you, yeah. First of all, the question is arising today, to what extent can the British Army trust the Afghan National Police?
That's a very good question. The Afghan National Police are one of the organisations that's held in lowest repute amongst all the different internal security organisations and military formations in Afghanistan. It is widely perceived as being a ragtag militia with very split loyalties. Some groups are loyal to the President, Mr Karzai, other groups are loyal to local tribal interests, and some groups are just out of control.
There's been talk that elements of the police take drugs money, but obviously now the fear is that perhaps they've been infiltrated by the Taliban.
Well, the issue is really that these police forces are drawn from their communities, and the area where this incident took place in, most of the population are supporters of the Taliban. It's a very strong Taliban area, so it's not surprising that they have infiltrated the police. They are drawn from the population, so they owe their loyalty to the population.
And there's a feeling that they can be trusted less than the army, the Afghan National Army, that the army is more trustworthy.
Well, the army is more trustworthy because it's drawn from areas away from Helmand province and the south of Afghanistan. A lot of the recruits come from the north, where they have a different perception of what the Afghan state is, and they have an interest in fighting what they see as Pashtun rebels. So the army has a more national view of things, whereas the police are a very local force that has a very local perspective.
But I mean, the problem for the British is that they have to train up both the police and the army there if they're ever to leave Afghanistan.
Yes, this is a double-edged sword. On the one hand, the threat comes from the local population and their extremist elements within that population, but you can't separate the population from the extremists unless you trust somebody in that community and try and get them on your side. So it is a very risky business. But you have to say that this is the first incident that this has happened in Afghanistan. So up to now, nothing like this has happened in the British sector at all.
But obviously a terrible tragedy today, 5 deaths. I mean, do you think it means that there should be a change of British tactics in the way that the British troops work with the police?
I think it's perhaps too early to say that because we don't yet know if this is a planned Taliban assassination or just one rogue soldier running amok. We'll have to wait until we have a proper handle on what actually happened in this incident. But it has to be said that looking at tightening up the recruitment processes for the police and tightening up in fact, the mentoring of them, putting in more British soldiers into the police units is a way to ensure that the coalition forces have a tighter grip on them.
OK, Tim Ripley, defence analyst, many thanks indeed for your time tonight.
Your pleasure.